Welcome to our new interview from Roots to Passions with Dr. Benjamin Freud. In this new series of interviews, we want to learn more about exceptional practitioners who have developed their passion for education from their formative experiences. Join us for a peek behind the curtain of some outstanding international educators and how they have achieved their success. Our next guest is Dr. Benjamin Freud, head of Upper School, Green School Bali, an educator, writer, and podcaster. He is the co founder of Coconut Thinking, an advisory that helps and supports educators nurture learning ecosystems grounded in relationships that contribute to the thriving of the bio collective. Welcome, Benjamin.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, we want to jump straight in and ask you then about your own experiences of school. Could you give us some insight into what school was like for you?
Yeah, no, I love school and I've been in school forever. And as a student, I think I counted and I did the 12 years before leaving high school. And then I think I must have done like 14 or 15 years after that because I just really enjoyed it. The high school years were, yeah, I mean, there was an amazing time. When you're trying to mass produce education and you're just putting people through like these tests and these lectures or whatever. And I never really quite knew what that was all about and why I should do it. So I just ended up doing other things like watch TV and play video games and do these things that are probably so familiar today. And then I went to university and that was quite different. I
Mm,
was in a small university, about 20, 25 kids to begin with. And I just loved being able to pick my classes and really talk to people who were usually interested in the same things as I was interested in. I was interested in the same things they were interested in. We just got great conversation. And then I just continued doing that. And that's where I made my best friends and where I really grew up intellectually, emotionally as a person, made mistakes, did that, but it was a wonderful time. And I don't think that I stopped reading or investigating some of those things ever since I don't know, for the last 30 years, some of the stuff that I
mm.
learned there. So that was fantastic. But high school, not so awesome because I just never knew why I was there.
Yeah, so there's a real kind of shift then between your experience of secondary, of high school, and of university. Um, do you think that was all down to the environment, or was it the pedagogical approach? What was it that made those experiences so different for you?
I think I just really got into this idea of being able to debate and talk and exchange and write essays. And I know it sounds really kind of lame and nerdy, but just being able to express yourself, be given the choice of things that I wanted to go into
Yeah.
within certain constraints, of course. I've always been the kind of person who like to push the envelope a little bit and maybe be provoke, a bit. And so that gave me that space to do that. Whereas in high school, there was so many multiple choice tests, you can't do that. And I got a PhD in history. I love history, but back then I don't think I think I failed history or almost failed it or maybe passed through generosity because they kept asking me about dates. And I just never really cared about dates. It never made any sense to me. So I think it's just that intellectual freedom to explore and just be creative. I really see history and writing essays as a creative act, and that was really something that spoke to me.
Yeah, it's so powerful when students can understand the why behind their learning, isn't it? And then if they don't understand why they're doing something, it makes it a much harder sell. And so, yeah, that really seems to kind of come across with you really understanding and taking autonomy in your learning in university. So I would like then to kind of understand your early career because you didn't immediately become a teacher. So you had quite a different path and then decided that you wanted to come into teaching. So could you kind of take us through that journey of what you did immediately and then what triggered that kind of interest in taking up teaching?
I left grad school with a degree in international development or something like that, comparative politics, under my arm, and I went to San Francisco where I had a friend, and I was going to go into economic development and help, Latin American peasants, do something, that
Mm,
very savior mentality. Um, And I got there and really can't survive in San Francisco on any kind of NGO or nonprofit work. So I
Mhm.
knew a little bit about technology and I ended up going to consulting. Now, this was 1997, which you can imagine in Silicon Valley, 97 was an exciting time.
Mm.
So I kind of fell into consulting on the internet industry. And these guys were, as I said, building Web 1.0. I mean, they were building the very basics of the internet. These guys were 28, 29, sometimes 30. I would go into these offices, and in order to save money, they had like doors that were on these little things that would, these, I don't know what they call these little steeples that they would use as tables. But everybody wanted to change the world, and there was such a buzz. And it was very hedonistic in so many ways.
Mm.
But I loved that rebellion. I loved the fact that people were saying, we're just going to do it this way.
Yeah.
I loved that energy. And then I ended up going because everything was so great before the dot-com boom, or sorry, bust, that I went to get an MBA thinking I was going to walk into any job in Silicon Valley, and that didn't really work out at all because the market crashed. So I ended up moving to London because it was the only job I could find back then because it was not a great time, and did more consulting there in technology. I moved to FMCG, so consumer goods. And I did that for about 4 years. That was pretty interesting. Got to work with some blue chip companies. But what that did at that time is it allowed me to work. Actually, I worked in a few other industries too, like pharmaceuticals and a little bit industrial. But what it helped me do was interact with um, CXOs across the company. So be it in HR or operations or finance or technology, whatever. And that kind of gave me an appreciation for not just what industries do, but what people in industry do. And what really is the heart that I mean, as a consultant, you never quite get to the heart, but from that perspective of going inside and digging around, you got an impression of how companies work. So I'll kind of put that to the side for a little bit.
Yeah.
I was having a bad day at work. My then wife called me up and say, "Hey, do you want to move to Asia?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, whatever, let's go." I thought it was going to be Singapore, and then ended up being Tokyo. Did more consulting there. Did financial services, and this is an important part of the story because I absolutely hated financial services and the culture there. She got transferred finally to Singapore, and I said, "Oh man, I'm just going to go do a PhD. When else am I going to be able to do that?" You talk about privilege. That was privilege. Long story short, we moved to New York. I had kids back then. I absolutely love being with kids of all sorts. Like I thought it was so much energy from them. It was so much fun. Whenever there was a party, I would rather be hang out and play with the kids and talk to the adults because I'm kind of shy. And then I said, you know what? It's got to be teaching. It's got to be going into education. It's the only thing that's ever made me happy. And it was just one day on the couch in New York City, and I thought this is what it's going to be, and that's
Yeah.
it. And I never looked back. And then yeah, that's how I got into teaching.
Oh.
And the reason I bring in the part about working across sectors and across functions is because I entered education with an insight, whatever that is, my own insight about what it was like to work in industry, from
Mm.
startups to Global 500 companies. What are some of the things that actually happens inside industry
Mhm.
in three different continents or regions and across sectors and across functions? So that was really powerful because going into to education, I thought, like, none of the stuff that's being done actually makes any sense because nobody cares. I
Yeah.
remember I was in a meeting, or not a meeting, I say I was at my desk and somebody came up from behind. They looked at my email and says, "God, you could tell like what are you doing? Like this is several paragraphs long. I need bullet points." And
Yeah.
that, those kinds of moments really tell me actually it's not what we're doing in schools that matters, and that's for employment, right? Much less other things.
Yeah. um Really interesting that you're able to kind of apply then those experiences then to your teaching practice, and it must have been a really interesting change for you to kind of move into that world of education and work out, yeah, what is important here, what are, what is the key to language here, all those different things. Okay, so it's interesting to see that development and into teaching. And I know that you then had a really varied career in your teaching career so far. So with experiences in New York, then Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand, and now in Bali. could you tell us a little bit about this journey that you've taken across different regions, some of the successes, some of the challenges that you've had on that way?
In Hong Kong, I was really lucky. I got to work in a super innovative school that was all mixed age, at least in high school and middle school. I was teaching social studies. I started there, and then I ended up being the vice principal for the middle school and high school. And this was a school that really was into just doing things and doing whatever is for the kids and a lot of project-based learning, a lot of it, but real project-based
Mm,
learning. Um, Again, it didn't matter what we did so long as the kids were learning and really moving to them. Eclectic bunch. We had kids who were super highly able, like I'm talking like seventh graders who were doing calculus, and then we had kids who weren't so strong. So it was a wide, it was such a variety. But what was wonderful about that school is how nimble it was. I remember there was a point the math curriculum wasn't working. In 6 days, we completely overhauled the middle school math curriculum, and I loved that. Like you do things smart, right? And you don't go knee jerk, but when you make a decision, you just go with it. So that was really formative. And then Saudi Arabia was started out to be a really innovative school where we can do whatever we want, and it kind of shifted a little bit, so it
yeah.
wasn't the right place for me. Thailand was an IB school.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily, how should I put this? So that was more traditional than I was hoping for my career, but what it really did was it taught me so many good things about the IB and things that I don't necessarily agree with, but
Mhm.
it gave me that flavor of what it would be to be in more of an institutionalized
Mhm.
school. And then I was lucky enough to consult for the IB in The Hague, went to a couple of things there. Writing curriculum there. So I got to see something about the IB that, there's so many good things about the IB, but also some of the things that I resist.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, I think it was in 2019, kind of realized, maybe a bit late, that, the earth is burning up. Realized that being part of schools is participating in that, and we're always going to participate, but there's certain degrees that I was felt comfortable participating and not participating.
Mm.
And so I got into a lot of notions of like, again, resisting some of the tropes that are being taught in schools that I think are do a lot more harm than anything. And then when it was time to leave Thailand, I said, I am going to go to Green School or maybe another school, and that's it. And if not, I'll just leave education because I just couldn't participate in what schools are doing to kids, but also the planet.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting, and I'd love to kind of press you a little bit more on that to understand what was it that you really found difficult to reconcile with what's being delivered in schools um and your approach to how we should be talking about sustainability and about the environmental crisis.
Yeah, it's a fascinating piece. I think like not my story, but how schools approach sustainability. And I'm on a lot of networks and I talk to a lot of people about this.
Mm,
And there's an operationalization of sustainability. So you have a school where they set up recycling bins, or maybe it's like a carpool lane or something like that. But if I told you that there was a building with solar panels, a compost bin, save paper posters everywhere, I mean, maybe not save paper, but you know what I mean,
mm,
and turn off the lights, you wouldn't know if it was a school, a bank, a Walmart, or an M&S. So operationally, it's so important, but it really has to live within the curriculum. The second problem is that when they do teach sustainability, and I don't know if that's even possible, it's often a sideshow. So somebody comes in with a curriculum that is put on the side, never really centralized. It's just something that they do, or maybe they do a unit or something. The people who write the curriculum aren't educators. The educators don't necessarily have the time or the expertise to be experts in an add-on. They don't speak the same language.
mm,
One doesn't speak school, the other one doesn't speak, ecological breakdown because there's no room in traditional curricula. So there's nothing there. It's like socio-emotional learning curricula. It shouldn't be on the side. It should be embedded everywhere. But I think that, we could talk about like some of these common things that most of your listeners will have heard about, the industrial model and all that stuff. But I think it goes way deeper than that. It goes into the fact that we're asking kids to be, I mean, I'll just take one, like this whole idea of student centric. Like
mm,
let's really think about what that means to be student centric. It's it's a positive move away from teacher dominated pedagogy,
Hmm.
and it's out of care, and we want to put the kids' needs first. But when you make it student centric, you're atomizing. You're making it about the individual. You are reinforcing the idea that we are disconnected from one another and reinforcing ego and narcissism.
Mm.
And that doesn't fall in line in anywhere near sustainability, much less regeneration, where it's about networks and relationship. So going student centered really keeps people in the center, which of course then keeps us humans at the center, anthropocentric, which really perpetuates the problem. Never mind the fact that in most of these systems, IB, A levels, French baccalaureate, wherever, at the end, you still have to sit by yourself at a table writing an exam of a question that you really don't care about, just so you can be sorted for universities in a way that is completely dehumanizing. And there is zero effort to do anything with the learning that contributes. They talk about CAS and they talk about service learning, but service learning, I mean, service is something you do in prison, right? It's not something that is often meaningful. Sometimes it is, of course, not. I'm doing broad brush here.
Mm.
But if we refocus this idea of what we do with our learning, taking that potential energy that is learning and transforming it into kinetic energy, which is doing positives or contributing to humans and other than humans, then we're changing that completely. And then sustainability becomes taking our learning and working towards a more healthful planet. Then it has
Hmm.
purpose. Because I taught history in the IB, and I can tell you, nobody cares because nobody in academia learns history that way. So what are we doing here? It's a joke to talk about sustainability. It's more than greenwashing, it's child washing. Student-centered learning is child washing of pretending that we're putting the students first when we're not, because we are endangering them, because by not working towards changing the trajectory of ecological breakdown, we're actually committing crimes of child protection. I mean, I don't know, like it is a child protection issue, not addressing a burning planet.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And you talk specifically about student centered learning. And this is something that we've heard a lot about kind of putting children at the center. And I mean, this is more than just a problem in education. This is the way that society has been formed, that we are anthropocentric, that we do have humans at the center of everything, that there is this kind of speciesism happening, that we have humans kind of at the center of everything. How do we unpick that? What are you doing at the Green School Bali to try to unpick some of those processes and to reframe how we should learn and what we should learn?
I think it comes down, so there's an ontological problem that is a problem of our starting point of what is being and of the idea of education as an institution and the values that are there. But before I go into Green School, I just want to emphasize that, a lot of people who want to go or who are pushing towards student-centered learning, they want to do better than what was before, and that's super
Yes.
commendable.
Yeah.
But it doesn't unfetter us from the issues. And the thing for me is this individualization of assessment and assessment, observation, evidencing learning. Just use whatever edu speak you want to learn here. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about exams, I'm talking about observations. It's the stuff that we do and how we measure learning quantitatively and qualitatively. It's always about the individual and what we do. I'll give you an example. For instance, how often do you have a presentation and the rubric, which is in itself, troublesome, but the rubric says, oh, speaks eloquently, looks somebody in the eye, stands up straight. None of that matters. None of that matters. The only thing that matters in the presentation is how you move your audience, the influence you have on your audience.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that matters in me on this podcast is if I've moved the thinking or in the feeling of your audience.
Yeah.
When Amanda Gorman speaks her poetry. When Martin Luther King gives a speech, I don't need a rubric to know that it puts chills on my body.
Mm-hmm.
I am moved by that. I am moved by the speeches of some of the indigenous leaders. I am moved by the speeches of the people who are protesting against what's going on right now in certain parts of the world. I am moved by that. And the mechanics, the tone, the slides, that supports moving. We're
Mm,
going to this point where it's not about you. That's the t-shirt that I want to put on everybody. It's not about you. It's about your relationship
mm,
with your audience and how you contribute. So at Green School Bali, for instance, so I teach the grade 12 capstone, or we call it Greenstone, which is a project. Project's the word, I mean, it's the wrong word. It's 2 years. But it's a capstone, it's an endeavor, it's an adventure, it's whatever you want to call it, that these kids are going on to contribute to the community. Community being human, other than human, more than human, whatever. And the first thing that we ask them to do is say, what's your why? And your why better not be because I'm interested in something. I don't care about your personal project. You're in grade 12.
yeah,
Why should I care about what you're doing? How are you going to contribute to the world? And that's the success criterion. It doesn't matter if you actually do, but you're going to try to do to contribute positively to the world in a way that helps all life thrive or whatever your
yeah,
community is. That's what we do, and that's baked in, and
yes.
nothing less will do it. If I hear about your personal journey, your I'm interested in this, like it doesn't work.
Mm,
How are you going to contribute?
yeah. I mean, I can feel the passion of what you're talking about, and it'd be really interesting to see how has, I mean, you've spoken to others before. How have other people kind of responded to your thoughts on how we should be reframing education? Um, have you had people come and observe what you're doing within the Green School Bali and say we want to do something similar, or are you meeting a little bit of a wall where people are just trying to adopt kind of almost
It's
the easier parts?
Yeah, no, it's challenging. We get visitors
Mm,
all the time. I talk to people all the time, and it does resonate. The problem is, and my good friend Kevin House talks about the credentialing cartel, the IB, the AP, the A levels, all Cambridge, all that stuff, who are holding schools hostage. And I'm not really hyperbolizing here. They really are like because they have really the credentials to get you to university, and
mm,
until we can get rid of this narrative that success, oftentimes the parent's success, not so much the students, but success is measured by the name that is on a diploma when you leave university. It's going
mhm,
to be really hard. We struggle to navigate staying true to what we want to do with some of these credentialing issues.
mm,
And so you can talk about contributing to everyone, but when we live in a world where the university just wants your 39 or 42 on your IB, that's difficult. And I tell you something, to get a 45 on your IB, I'm willing to put money out there that you probably haven't participated too much in efforts and endeavors and adventures that have contributed to your wider community. I'm generalizing here, I get it, but the system is such that you have to study so much, you are locked into having to get, six sevens or whatever, however many you
mm,
have, and a three on your TOK and EE to be able to do that. It just doesn't allow you that space, and CAS is kind of a reason to do that. But let's face it, CAS doesn't have points, so does it count?
yeah,
Um, so it's really challenging. It's really challenging until this university narrative gets broken down, and that's going to take a while. Or universities are just going to crumble because at the end of the day, let's ask our questions. Why do you need to go to university?
yeah,
Why?
yes, yeah. I mean, I think all good. I mean, all really interesting thoughts there. Why we go to university, why we're funneling people into universities for and to take on serious amounts of debt that will continue to impact you throughout the rest of your life. What you gain from that. You talk so much about that kind of like the individual narrative of what success is, and it's very much this kind of constructed view that you go to school and you work really hard and you get these grades and then you go to this university and you do this and then you get this job, and that's the path, that's the only pathway to success. But I think trying to really demonstrate other examples of where success can come from, that people can go to different alternative provision and be successful people, and success doesn't need to be measured either in your degree or even we have to consider that people need to live and be comfortable, but it doesn't need to be like this extreme examples of what success is and how we kind of destruct these kind of these bones of what society is. It's all interlinked and it's really complex. Um, but I really appreciate that you're kind of taking this on and you're opening up this conversation and provoking this conversation further. Um, so from there, could you explain to us then a little bit about the delivery of your program within the Green School Bali, just so that listeners can understand a little bit more about what the school experience is like for learners?
Yeah, it's a school that doesn't have any walls. Operationally, as I was mentioning, it's probably like it doesn't get much more sustainable than
Mm,
our school. But what we try to do is actually change the culture in such a way that is all about relationships and all about, I won't use the word empowering students. I am very uncomfortable with that because if you empower students, you can take that power away. So where is the power? Power emerges in relationships. It's not something that is held or can be taken away. What we do things. So I mean, I could pick from a grab bag of examples. Students, we invite them every term to say, "Are you interested in learning about something?" They volunteer ideas. If we can get enough students to take a class, we'll teach the class. Kid wants to learn about existentialist literature because she read the Stranger. Guess what? We've got a class next term on existentialist literature. Same thing happened with an entrepreneurship course. We made it a little bit eco, is eco entrepreneurship. Somebody else wanted something about current events. We did that. So the students participated in the creation of the curriculum. We have a student government that is a class. It's 4 hours a week. They have a class and they get credit for it. And I invite them, and I'm not saying this is working out perfectly because we have to change that culture, but I invite them not just to do events and bake sales and all that stuff, but to sit with me and with other members of the leadership team to write policy, real policy about the school, about not just safety, but learning and graduation and be part of that. And I told them once provocatively, I said, I don't care if you have a voice, because if you have a voice, nobody listens to you. I want you at the table. And then the other day I said, I don't even care if you're at the table because you might not be eating. Just because you're at the table doesn't mean that you're eating. So we really want to have them as participants, and everybody brings in their ideas and their experience. We have kids who participate in marketing the school. Like we are an environment where we don't have exams, but we have evidence of learning. But most of the stuff that we do has a lot of content in it, but only in order to do stuff. Give you an example in science when they're learning about elasticity and force. They make a catapult out of bamboo, and then the final thing is who can, chuck a snooker ball the farthest or something like
yeah.
that. And they're really making it. They're making bikes out of bamboo. I don't know how great those bikes are. They're very heavy, but at least they're still making the frames out of
Yeah.
bamboo. They're regenerating because it fell into disuse after COVID, an aquaponics center. We have one teacher in middle school who is learning all about gosh, I forgot bio. Oh gosh, I forgot what it's called. It's like a way in Bali to grow food that's based on the relationships with the gods and the cosmology and I'm sorry I am the word is eluding me, but whether or not we believe in that, there's still that growing your own food with local farmers that also steeps you in Balinese culture. So
Yes.
we do stuff like that. So guess what? They go out and they're going and not just having their community garden, but really working with local farmers.
Yeah.
So we can pretty much do whatever we want so long as kids are happy and learning. And that's
Yeah.
really hard to do. Happy kids who
Yeah.
are learning.
Yeah. Um,
Biodynamics, that's what it's called. Biodynamics.
Thank you for sharing. It's really interesting to see how, the actual delivery of what you're doing within the school to kind of to build those skills that we were talking about, to try to remove that sense of ego and try to move to more of a collective. And it's really interesting for schools to for students to know, the actual process of where their food comes from, the difficulties of farming, how difficult it is to actually create what they actually have on their table at the end of the day. So much of that is so far removed for students.
Mhm.
um, Spending that time and doing that for them, it must be incredibly fruitful for their understanding of their environment. So incredible things that you're doing in that sense for schools, in a wider sense. If they were looking to make bigger changes, um, what could they do, if they're really trying to kind of take on some advice about um, their impact and goals for sustainability? What advice would you give to schools?
I think that again, the last 2 years are really difficult for most schools because they got to get those points, they got to get those A stars and those 42. So I appreciate those constraints. I'm not saying that it's easy, and people want to do so much, but they can only do so much.
Mm,
It's probably easier, maybe in the British system before the GCSEs, and in IB, it's certainly possible in the MYP. Certainly possible to, again, it's absolutely wonderful to do things that operationalize sustainability. But if we think about like there's so much flexibility in these curricula to really start up. Like let's think about what would happen if a bunch of grade sevens, grade eights, grade nines would start up their own business and say individuals in society or something like that, and only be able to uh, source food that is within, say, I don't know, a 20-minute bike ride of the school. So within that radius, and that's
mm,
it. And it has to be organic. Now, what would that tell us about the food in our community? Because this is something we haven't talked about. We haven't talked about the importance of place. So
mm,
that's maybe a longer conversation for another time. But what does that tell us about our community? Can we find organic food? Is there anywhere that grows that? What can we do? In cities, it's a lot harder. What does that tell us? Can we grow it ourselves? Let's talk about starting a business. Let's talk about surveying what the local, the local customers might want. Let's talk about all the importance of cooking, the collaboration that's there, the community building, and so like those are the skills and by and this and learning and connections that we're really going to want to do. And you could still put that within the mark scheme of MYP. You could still do it with some creativity. The idea is to be creative enough not to break the rules. We don't cheat and lie and steal, but creative enough to work within those constraints. That could work. It's just about having that courage not to study the Mesoamerican culture. Like that means nothing if it's decontextualized. Talk to me about empire collapse, then we'll talk about the Maya. Talk to me about the importance of cross-cultural connections with food, then we could talk about transatlantic trade. And but don't talk to me about these historical things that nobody cares about and nobody learns about because world history hasn't been taught in 25 years, like in academia. Um, like let's make it a connection to kids that actually get them to use their hands, do things, connect, and work with each other. And then, most importantly, and I'll end with this, and then the only thing that matters is some kind of quantitative, qualitative, post-qualitative measure of the contribution that you've made by gathering the voices of those you've benefited. Your assessment, let's put it this way, is how much are people coming back and loving your food? How awesome would that be?
yeah.
That's your assessment.
Mhm.
None of this other stuff about whether or not you have citations in grade seven. I mean, that's ridiculous. How much of those people love your food? How many repeat customers do you have? That's
Yeah.
your assessment.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that really ties us nicely to the point we made at the beginning about understanding the why, about
Mhm.
what is in, why am I doing this? What is the importance of this? Can I really understand? Am I just so far down a system that I'm just following it and I don't know how to break out of it? Or am I really questioning the why and thinking, what is the point in this? Why am I doing it? What am I getting from it? Um, Thank you so much for your time. It was such a fascinating conversation. So you can learn more about Benjamin's work on his podcast, on his website, on Coconut Thinking, and we'll reference all of this underneath this discussion. Thank you so much for your time, Benjamin. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire.